Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling. We're doing a full overview of the KILLA KANZ for narrative play in 40k. I'm starting with them because I'm doing Crusade and I'm having orks as my army for them, and KILLA KANZ are pretty cool. KILLA KANZ are of course the 10-foot tall dreadnoughts powered by grots. These guys do tend to get a rather brutish increase in violence and love to go and lord over the orks who once bullied them their newfound power. Of course, this usually ends in an orc getting stomped flat. To prevent Gretchen from killing each other, mechs usually use a lottery system to decide who becomes a KILLA KANZ pilot. And of course, they are usually quite loyal to their mechs for giving them this newfound power, but mechs do realize it's very smart to give them a sort of off switch so in between battles they can be powered down for later use without causing too much trouble. Of course, with that out of the way, we can start to discuss KILLA KANZ more so in a general sense. These guys are toughness 6 with 5 wounds apiece, a 3+ save, and a 6+ invulnerable. This makes them quite dense if they're not the most resilient against things like anti-tank weapons, but they're quite resilient to things like heavy bolters, small arms, and stuff like that. In terms of ranged weapons, their right arm will usually consist of either a can shooter, which has a high rate of fire and dev wounds, but no AP and single damage, or a rocket launcher, which is the best all-rounder in my opinion. It has multi-damage, but its D3 shots are unreliable. The Grotzuka is a funnel-loaded shotgun, which is just kind of funny. It's best for chaff clearing, but will struggle versus big infantry. And the Scorcher has good overwatch, but very short range. Then on the left arm, you will usually see a can claw, which crumps good. It's damage 3, but it hits on 4s, it's strength 8 and AP 2. All these weapons do have their upsides, so to say, but if you want to go general purpose, the rocket launcher is going to be your best starting point, especially for an early crusade. Since these are Gretchen, they do have a much better ballistic skill than your average full-sized greenskins. Though with certain upgrades we'll cover later, the can shooter, the Grotzuka even, and the Scorcher can all come into their owns, and while they do hit on 4s in melee, their profile is good enough to not really matter. Now, they are Gretchen, they do have some downsides. They scare quite easily. They're only leadership 8, which definitely does suck, so them getting scared and running around, or whatever it may be, isn't too uncommon, so we're going to try and patch that. First up, we'll be running them in a bigger unit. We're going to be running them in 6s, mainly because I think that's cooler, and it also just makes them more effective. So with all that aside, we're going to see what we can do to make these Gretchen-powered mini-Death Dreads much more effective through the use of the Crusade rules from the 4 books that are out at the moment. Let's get right into it, starting with, of course, Tyranic War first. Now, in Tyranic War, these guys are walkers, so they will get the Striding Behemoths upgrade path of the 2 sort of unique ones for monsters and those who hunt them. So, starting off, they will of course get the core Striding Behemoths, which is each time this unit destroys an enemy unit, they subtract 2 from their out of action test. This is pretty good. It can just be useful to handicap an enemy in any prolonged campaigns, and it can also just be useful to get rid of any valuable battle traits, but it's nothing too special from there. Now, what we're going to want to move towards after this, in my opinion, is a little bit up to your choice. If you want to make them tougher, you'd want to go with Indomitable Stature. This means that anything that is strength higher than their toughness will be -1 to wound. This can be really useful against things like autocannons, melta-guns, just to make them less effective. They can also get rerolls 1s to hit when they're making ranged attacks, which is quite good with their Gretchen ballistic skill, especially when we get to the orc-specific upgrades, which will make them stupidly accurate. In terms of other ones that you could go for, you could get Prey Taker, which would let you get +1 to advance and charge, always good for orcs, and they can get Fights First, which can make them quite formidable for opposing orcs or Chaos Space Marines to take down. The other option would be Sustained Hits 1 in melee, which is useful given their sort of middling amount of attacks. Though it really does depend on what you want your unit of KILLA KANZ to do. If you have them as a generalist unit, I would say the Indomitable Stature is better. Some accurate Gretchen stomping around with rocket launchers that are very tough to remove is going to be very cool and just kind of thematic to what you want your unit to do. But if you look at something that wants to maybe be more aggressive, maybe you could take something like Scorchers and give them the melee upgrades. This would make them quite effective at blasting away things like Cultists or Imperial Guard, and then if they have Fights First, they'll be almost unchargeable, as their melee prowess is so good against most infantry. The only thing that would threaten them is vehicles, which they also can chop up quite well. They'd be very generalist either way. It just depends what you want more of. Do you want your Gretchen to be more shooty, as a maybe more sane unit of Gretchen would be? Or do you want your Gretchen to have gone more insane while being wired into their cans, so maybe they have sort of foregone their shooty nature, and just want to chop things up with their effectively very souped up power fists. Both of these paths are quite good in my opinion, and would suit your KILLA KANZ quite well. Moving on from there, we have one last thing to cover in the Tyranic War, as none of the relics particularly affect KILLA KANZ. That is the Strutting Behemoth's upgrade path, or battle trait table. This has two traits. One of them simply doubles your kill tally for Tyranic War Veteran XP, which I don't think is very good, because that's just kind of trading a battle trait to get battle traits faster, which is a little bit redundant in my opinion. The other one, though, is Rapid Adaptation, which allows you to select one battle trait from the Monster Hunter's path, which is really good. I'm not going to cover all of them, but just the standouts, because I want to save that for a video on Knobs or Space Marines. Of course, Giant Slayers gives you reroll 1s to hit against monsters and vehicles, very useful, though you can get that through your normal path. The Nimble Defense gives you a Feel No Pain 5+ when a monster vehicle attacks you, which is just nice because things like big gladiator tanks could be very nasty against these guys. But the big one is Titan's Bane. This gives you a anti-monster 4+, anti-vehicle 4+ on your weapons, which is just really good, especially with that can shooter, as it has devastating wounds. And since each of them has 5 attacks with that, you'd have 30 attacks. They're all quite accurate, especially for orks. And you could just really hose out a lot of devastating wounds, which is just a really cool visual, and also feels very right for an elite unit of KILLA KANZ, which is how I like to use them. Next up, we are moving on to the next Crusade book, which is Pariah Nexus. This one doesn't have a whole unique tree for monsters and vehicles. It is much more generalist. We will cover any Blackstone relics or abilities that are very useful for your KILLA KANZ, though. Let's get into it. So first up, we have the Monster and Vehicle Unit Battle Trait table. There's of course 6 here. And first up, we have Hardened Defenses. This gives your unit a 6+ Feel No Pain, which is great on KILLA KANZ just because they have so many wounds per model. You will no doubt bounce quite a few wounds over the course of these units being removed. Next, we have Totemic Presence, which gives you 2 to a single model's objective control, which isn't bad. You know, that bumps you up from 12 OC to 14 OC in a big unit, which is quite useful. And these guys are quite beefy, so if they're sitting on an objective and you need to hold it, these are probably one of the best guys for the job, especially with this upgrade. Tank Hunter gives you a reroll 1s to wound against monsters and vehicles, which is, of course, always handy, especially with the mid-strength weapons of the Can Claws and the rocket launches, for example. Stubborn Explorator means each time this unit makes a normal or advanced move, it can move over terrain features that are 4 inches or less in height, as if they were not there. This is quite useful, as it effectively allows them to just plow through smaller ruins or similar kinds of terrain features. Then you have Heavily Armored. Once per battle, when an attack is allocated to a model in this unit, you can change the damage characteristic of that attack to 0. This is quite good and very orky, of course, because it's generally an ork thing where even if you do land a huge blow against something, there's a good chance what you hit is just not important and it will fall off and the vehicle will be none the worse for wear. This can also allow you to save a KILLA KANZ from death. For example, say a railgun from the Tau was pointed at you, you could then turn that attack to damage 0, which would save your KILLA KANZ and then allow you a full power counterattack next turn. Finally, we have Reaper. Each time a model in this unit makes an attack that targets an infantry or mounted unit, reroll a hit roll of 1. This is quite solid. KILLA KANZ are already quite efficient at clearing hordes with Grodzukas, just because of how many attacks they get. On top of that, if you add on the rerolls, they'll be very effective, to the point where it might even be overkill, but if there's one thing Gretchen liked doing, it's hosing down people smaller than them with bullets. So it is very fitting. All of these I think are actually quite good. I'd say they all just sort of fit different roles. If you just need a beefy unit to do whatever you tell it to, get Hardened Defenses and Totemic Presence. This will allow them to simply stand around and be really annoying to remove and will hold objectives with the best of them. If you want a Armor Hunter, Tank Hunter is of course your way to go, just because of, you know, the general profiles for the KILLA KANZ. Stubborn Explorator is good on anyone if you have a spare battle honor. Heavily Armored, Reaper, and everything else really, I've already said it, but they're all quite good. I'd say Heavily Armored is just fantastic to keep your unit at full power for longer, and can really throw a wrench in enemies' plans. Now, again, all of these kind of depend on what you want to run your cans as, what the story is for them. As I already mentioned, you could have the tanky objective monkeys, basically, where they just sit around and are really tough to remove. Maybe give them scorches so they can overwatch any units that come too close. If you want your tank hunters, of course, just bring tank hunter and heavily armored to have a unit that is not only very tough against tanks, but can smack them even better than usual. And then if you just want someone to clear out a lot of infantry, a Stubborn Explorator and Reaper is going to be a really good combo as well, because you could, say, run through the ruins at the back of someone's deployment zone and just destroy whoever's on the back field camping it, whether it be Sisters of Silence or even something like Intercessors, which could really get torn up by Grotzukas or even just rocket launches for general purpose needs. Overall, it's very hard to go wrong with them here, and if you are doing one of those campaigns where the Game Master requires you to roll for everything, there's not a single one here that's bad, so don't feel too bad about rolling for your results, even if, me personally, I prefer letting my players choose what they want to make their characters and units their own. Beyond that, there isn't anything that really applies to Killa Kanz outside of that, aside from mission objectives, which isn't what we're really talking about here. Overall, Pariah Nexus, it's a good place to be a Killa Kanz because you can be kitted out to do just about anything. With that, let's move on to the next book, which is, of course, Noman Gauntlet. So, Noman Gauntlet is much like Pariah Nexus, and where the vehicles just have a standard upgrade path, so to say. So we're just going to cover all of them and give my thoughts. Now, I am doing a Noman Gauntlet Crusade as the Crusade I'm getting ready for, so I will go a little bit more in depth here just because it's where I'm building my unit for. So, first up we have Reinforced Armor. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model in this unit, worsen the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. I think this is a pretty solid upgrade. It allows you to be more resilient against things like accursed weapons and power weapons in general, which, is nice, though damage 1 isn't really going to threaten a unit like this that has so many wounds. Monstrous Momentum gives you 2 inches of extra movement, which is simply fantastic. Getting these guys up to 8 inches of movement means they're quite zippy, and of course, with how tough they are, it's a bit surprising how fast they can move. Then you have Behemoth, which is my personal favorite for this, and it's really only exceptional on this unit, in my opinion, because it just simply gives every unit in the every model in the unit 2 extra wounds. So that brings these guys from 5 wounds to 7 wounds. 7 wounds is, of course, a lot, and having 6 of them is a lot. Now, 7 wounds is interesting because it really does mess with a lot of damage profiles. Damage 2 needs, needs an extra hit. Damage 3 needs an extra hit. But beyond that, it's just such a strange characteristic because a lot of weapons, like big anti-tank weapons that have flat damage, will often be damage 6 or something like that, which also, won't just wipe one of these guys out. And it just makes the unit really dense, having, 42 wounds to chew through on a solid defensive profile. This is the first one I'm giving to my units as soon as they rank up. Then you have Unrelenting. You can ignore any or all modifiers to this unit's move characteristic. In addition, each time this unit makes a normal move, models in this unit can move through terrain, but if any do so the unit has moved through, roll 1d6. On a 1 to 3, this unit is battle shocked. Definitely a steep price to pay, but for Killa Kanz, I think this is exceptional. Just being able to blow through a piece of terrain is really good. That could definitely be a problem on denser tables for these guys to get through, and Crusade often will be playing on very dense tables. Titan Slayer is up next. It gives you reroll a hit. If you're targeting monsters or vehicles, you get to reroll once to hit. If it's a Titanic unit, you get to reroll the hit roll instead, which is really good. These guys are already quite accurate, so giving them just a little bit of extra accuracy is very nice. And then Talismanic is pretty interesting. It simply gives you an extra 2 XP each time you're marked for greatness. Now, I'm actually playing in a double XP Crusade, so this could definitely be used to fast track to a pretty crazy amount. But still, I think it's just alright. When it comes to this sort of XP battle traits, I think they're sort of, I don't know, they're not my favorite just because you're giving up a battle trait to get a battle trait more later. I still think it's very good, but not my first choice. The first 5 I think are all quite good. We're going to go more into that now. So what I'm going to be running my Killa Kanz with is definitely going to be Monstrous Momentum and Behemoth, and then I'm going to give them the custom job shootier guns, which we'll cover at the end. and that's going to just make them much faster, much tougher, and much shootier. They'll be a very independent unit that can just go off and take on most targets competently, at the very least, and shouldn't have too much trouble getting XP, whether it be scragging the killiest git, or just in general getting a lot of kills. I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. But I'm going for a very skilled type of unit. If you wanted to go for pure tankiness, obviously take Behemoth, and then reinforced armor, of course, would be very good, just to make them even more resilient. And then Unrelenting, I think, would be a great option on any KILLA KANZ build. In fact, when I get these guys up to veteran status, right, so they can get more battle traits, I am going to give them Unrelenting so they can just plow through buildings, because that'll just be really useful. Overall, I'd say that all of these are quite good. Not quite as universally good as the ones from the Pariah Nexus, but still very, very solid. And still plenty to be done there. I think you can make a really good fast armor hunting unit. You can make a very tanky, speedy unit. You can make a unit that snowballs really quickly with Talismanic. There's definitely a lot you can do here. Slightly, not quite as flexible, but in my opinion, I like this skill tree more than in Pariah Nexus. With that, we are going to move on to the fourth and last of the Crusade books, Armageddon, and then we will do the Orks Codex to cover the few things that can affect them there. Alright, starting off again, we're in the Monsters and Vehicles units. Battle traits, starting off first, we have Warding Inscriptions. Models in this unit have a Feel No Pain 6+ against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. While this unit has one or more warp counters, models in this unit have a Feel No Pain 5+ against psychic attacks and mortal wounds. Generally pretty useful. This could definitely help, as mortal wounds would be a very effective way of chewing through these guys. Advanced Dispensers gives your ranged weapons assault, which is fantastic to let these guys completely leg it and still shoot all their weapons. Extra Armor is very nice as well. This just simply increases the toughness of models in this unit by 1. While I'd say this is probably better on other units, I'd still say it's solid here. Just going from toughness 6 to 7 isn't really the biggest difference. But still, it can have its uses, especially against things like plasma guns, which now really need to overcharge to be very effective. Juggernaut allows you to ignore any or all modifiers to its move characteristics. In addition, each time this unit makes a normal move, it can move through sections of terrain features more than 2 inches in height, but if any do so just after this unit is moved, roll on with d6. On a 1 to 3, this unit is battle shocked. Pretty much a copy-paste from the last one. Endless Rage means you're eligible to shoot and declare a charge in a turn which it fell back. And finally, we have Demon Hunters. This allows you to just re-roll the wound roll against unbound adversaries, which are the demon NPC units from this campaign. But you also do get an extra XP if you destroy them, with Dealers of Death, I should say, which is alright, but just not really that impactful. Not only is it not guaranteed that you'll be in range of unbound adversaries, it's just kind of very specific, which is not always what you want from a battle trait. Overall, I'd say this table is alright. It doesn't do too much for the smaller vehicles, like our KILLA KANZ here, but Endless Rage and Juggernaut are both quite good. Warding Inscriptions is solid, and Advanced Dispensers is probably the best, just to allow them to advance and shoot their rocket launchers or scorches or whatever they're using. But overall, definitely out of the 4 we've looked at so far, definitely the weakest. Next up, we have the Orks Codex itself, and surprisingly, there's only 2 battle traits that can affect them here, with an honorable mention to a third. First, we have Shootier Guns, the custom job. This, of course, costs 2 requisition points, but it is absolutely phenomenal. I will be running this all the time. Each time this unit is selected to shoot, we can roll 1d6 on a 1 until the end phase. Ranged weapons equipped by models in this unit have the hazardous ability. On a 2 to 5 until the end of the phase, improve the ballistic skill characteristic of ranged weapons equipped by models in this unit by 1. And on a 6, you get that same effect, but you also get Ignores Cover. Great for the middling AP of most of the weapons here, and also just to get them hitting on 3s. This effectively makes them Space Marine Terminators, or at least not far off in a lot of ways, because they're going to have that Power Fist-like melee and really accurate weaponry. This is absolutely a must, and compared to the other custom job they have access to, it's not even close. Now, flavor and fluff withstanding, of course, but I don't even think this one's particularly flavorful. Next up, we have Shaka Hull. This is in the fight phase. Each time an enemy unit is selected to fight, if this unit was selected as the target of one or more of those attacks, Roll 1d6 after the attacks, and on a 4+, the enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Not great. Like, this feels more like it should be on a truck, or perhaps a buggy of some kind. Not KILLA KANZ, and also I just don't think it's that fun. Like, you're just not really going to see this do much, which is a shame. I think this could have been very cool, maybe giving out some sort of debuff, or making the mortal wounds much more numerous. Something like that could have been interesting. Now, I did also want to shout out Boss Mech. This is, of course, a mech upgrade. That means you get to ignore a failed out-of-action test, which could be useful. There is a decent amount of -2 to out-of-action tests, so being able to ignore that to keep your KILLA KANZ at max efficiency would be very good, though I would bring the mech along with something else, maybe a Death Dread with a bunch of guns, or something like that, so he has something to buff while this guy is off doing other things. Regardless, I just had to mention that, obviously, because that's a very important and valuable rule that the KILLA KANZ have access to. Now, with all of that, we've just about covered everything, and I am going to just draft up my use of KILLA KANZ in my upcoming Noman Gauntlet crusade, maybe just to give you a couple ideas. Oh! These are the Spetscans. Under the charge of one Warp Delva, a war boss of the Blood Axe clan primarily, and his own personal clan being called the Sun Stealers, these were made shortly after a crusade to a planet known as Hydraxan 4. Where they acquired a decent sum of Blackstone, they started to put this into their war machines, and the Spetscans were one such invention. Equipped with rocket launches and can claws, they are trained to the utmost level Gretchen can be before being put into those metal dreadnoughts. Of course, this does mean that they are quite a cut above the rest of KILLA KANZ one might expect, and they are equipped as the following. Aside from their rocket launches and can claws, they are tougher thanks to the Blackstone woven through their design. They are also gifted with a increased amount of power to their pistons and fuel injectors to allow them to move faster. This also culminates with their improved targeting systems that allows them to shoot much more accurately. In the upcoming crusade for the planet Matau, they are working towards making themselves even more renowned to earn more praise from their war bosses and mechs. They are also looking to expand their arsenal and abilities, but what strange power shall they develop in the meantime of this crusade to steal this planet from Imperial control? Only time will tell. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you'd give your KILLA KANZ down below. See you all next time.